Wordscapes, Mazescape Labyrinthos, and Shang-Chi, Legend of the Ten Rings. This is Staying In. We all chastised Pete a few weeks back for saying it was hot when it was 16 degrees. I think now, Pete, we can recognise the fact, I think almost unanimously, that it is hot.
Hot, yeah, it is hot. It's 29 degrees down here.
I think it's roughly around the same here. I think maybe a bit lower than that, but roughly the same.
And listener, Pete has very kindly turned his air conditioning off, not to spoil the audio that you're currently listening to right now. So it's going to get even harder for Pete the longer we record.
I'm going to start to sweat. Well, I mean, I'm already started. I'm going to continue to sweat out into this Donald Duck T-shirt that I'm wearing.
Yeah, I'd like to think that the temperature is going to rise 1 degree every 10 minutes.
It's like a slightly sort of middling Saw movie, isn't it? Really, like ratcheting up the tension.
That's it. If the Brits had directed Saw,
yeah,
it's that, and someone's got a cup of tea behind a locked glass case, and it's freshly brewed, and it's just like, this is going to go cold in the next 20 minutes unless you solve my.
Let's play a little game.
Do you know what? I don't want to talk about this anymore because I'm just getting a little bit too anxious about the whole thing.
My friend, he owns a house and he rents it out. No, he rents it out to his younger brother is a tenant in his house. He's basically a landlord essentially. And when he worked in Europe, and when he would get bored, he would activate the remote thermostat which he had, which his brother tenant couldn't access. So in the middle of the summer, he would just whack the thermostat up to max.
Brilliant. I mean, that is categorically the one reason why I will never get like a Hive internal heating system, hands down.
I've got some lights that allow me to change using an app.
Oh yeah, I'm down to clown with that. Yeah, definitely.
Yeah,
but
that my thinking on that is basically, eventually when I move house, I might just leave a few of them here, but keep connected to them and just really mess with them.
I once found a light bulb in a unusual place, and I was desperate for a light bulb. So I searched around the house looking for a light bulb, and the one I eventually found was the bulb from the inside of the oven, which had the same connector to my bedside table, like the really thin screw-in. Was the same as that. Those little kind of squatty ones. Wow. So for a good long time, I had an oven light at my bedside table.
Did it turn off when your room got to temperature?
Did you when you turned the light on because you wanted to read a book? Did it smell like a roast dinner?
Well, that's not how the oven lights work, Pete. They're not the bit that cooks them.
Yeah.
I got stuck in traffic on the way back from a former colleague's retirement do, which meant that I had no dinner, and it meant that when I went to the cinema with Sam, I had to dine out at the Odeon Lux.
Ooh.
And I haven't eaten anything other than popcorn from a cinema probably since I was, 15, 16?
I've never had anything other than popcorn and pick 'em
I
mix
think
at
I've had
cinema.
nachos before.
No.
Yeah, that was the last thing I had, Dan. I think it was to see Kill Bill Volume 2 or Volume 1, I think. And I ate them all before I walked into the cinema. I remember that.
No, I've eaten them in the cinema, but I've always, even with popcorn, I think I've always eaten all the food before the film has started.
Well, the annoying thing is, and it's not really annoying, it's actually a health and safety thing, I should say. Because of COVID, you order everything from this screen and then they kind of prepare it for you, but you don't get like a plate of nachos. I basically got everything to assemble my own nachos, and the problem was it was a triple dip nachos, and I ordered 5 chicken strips.
Yeah.
But with a dip. But in both of those orders, I couldn't say no dip, so I had 4 dips.
I think what really sells this story is that because Kris had to order all this food, it made us late to the start of the film. Like, not the actual start of the film yet. We
like half an hour beforehand.
Yeah, so when we got in there, the lights had gone down and the adverts had started, which meant Chris could only actually see the food he was eating at sort of intermittent flashes. And you know what trailers are like these days, where it's just like, oh no, the MacGuffin has escaped. Duh! And it's just like in those big splashes of light. Chris was just there like, and then just sitting away, and then be like, duh. With one of his 6 dips, just
Oh my god! And occasionally, there'll be a lull, and Sam would just hear me go, "Oh god." Something's funny. And there was a girl sat next to me, and she was just shielding her face. I thought, oh my gosh, is it just like she's horrified by me eating? But she was basically trying to avoid spoilers in all the trailers. She's like, oh, what's this? Oh god, Spider-Man! And she would just shield her face, and they go, okay, right, it's okay now. Oh god, no, the Eternals. Oh god. And so she didn't see any of the trailers. She just kept her face shielded. She was that kind of worried about spoilers. Really. Or she hates guacamole. Well, I had 2 lots of it, so didn't ask for it. Exactly. But well, I did, but I didn't want it.
Also, you've also ruined the quiz. The game I was going to play, which was guess how many people were in the cinema with Sam and Chris this time.
Was it?
It's at least 3.
I was going to say
it was reasonable.
Okay,
it was actually pretty well attended.
What did you go to cinema to see?
We went to go and see the latest Marvel movie.
Ooh.
The second of 3, the second of 4, which will be released this year. Sorry. So we'd already seen Black Widow.
Oh, yes.
There's the Eternals. There's Spider-Man to come. But this was Shang-Chi and the Legend of the Ten Rings. And probably, like most people, this is like one character who I had absolutely no knowledge of at all, like going into like, and even like a cursory glance. And I'm not like the biggest Marvel fan. Like my Marvel knowledge basically comes from 90s cartoon programming on like Saturday mornings and stuff. So like Shang-Chi was like completely like over my head in terms of, you know, basically how this character fits in to like the wider world. I feel like now we're entering this period with Marvel films is that whenever a new character comes along, that's my first thought is like, all right, okay, how are they driving this whole thing forward? Like how are they fitting into like the wider universe, like the MCU? Like what part are they gonna play in this phase going forward? So it's quite a relief then that like this film has pretty much 0 connective tissue to the rest of the MCU for most of its runtime. Like they mention the blip once and there's a poster referring to it. But other than that, it completely stands on its own as a movie. In fact, after say like the first hour and a half, maybe like 2 hours, I would forget that it was a Marvel film. Like it was just a genuinely really interesting film that kind of definitely comes a lot from the fact that like Shang-Chi is a kung fu, essentially like it's a kung fu film. Part of that means that a lot of its action, a lot of its narrative resides in this very like physical art form, this physical like representation of like power and ability and like almost like choreography, like dance. So it was very easy to get like sucked into that and forget that this is like the fantastical, mystical, everyone's got laser beams for eyes, like Marvel like universe. And yeah, that kung fu is incredible. Like it is some of the best stuff I've seen on screen in a long, long time. And you know, it reminded me a lot of like sitting with my dad and watching like Jet Li films, watching Jackie Chan films, watching like basically John Woo movies. And yeah, it's absolutely astounding, like the effort and the energy and the physicality they put into these kung fu fights. Like the stunt coordinator Brad Allen, who unfortunately has recently passed away, him and quite a lot of the stunt choreographers actually were part of Jackie Chan's team. So a lot of the fights have that same like rawness that like Jackie Chan did. Like I don't know if you like whenever a Jackie Chan film would finish, you'd always get those post-credit scenes of like Jackie Chan trying to do all the stunts, and it always like all the outtakes from him trying to do it. And then that's when it would click. It would be like, oh my God, like he does them all himself. Like Simu Liu, who plays Shang-Chi, actually replicates that. Like he does all the fighting himself. Like he does everything. And like it's really obvious that they're trying to recreate that sense of like how visceral and how raw and how physical these fights are, but then also trying to step them up and bring them like into the, you know, sort of 21st century filmmaking, and the results are absolutely staggering. Like, and this was a thing about actually having lots of people in the cinema, which was different to when we went to go and see the Suicide Squad and Black Widow, is that you could hear people like audibly gasping about how good this kung fu is and how real it felt and how present it felt on the screen. It was absolutely spectacular. It was really, it's so like I'd see it again just for the fights, hands down.
Yeah, it took me back to when I was in my second year with my housemates watching Ong Bak. And we watched the whole film.
Tony Jaa,
and then we'd go back and just skip straight to the fight scenes and just see the actual contact of limbs on other bodies. Just phenomenal, really. And what surprised me about this film is that it's not just a simple little origin story just to test the water to see if this is a character that could actually, you know, fully ingratiate themselves within the MCU. They're confident in this character very clearly. This is an epic. This is genuinely an epic. I had no idea it would go to the scale it goes to. It's this beautiful, epic, sweeping grandeur that underpins it, really, that is reminiscent of, like, you know, Crouching Tiger or any of those kind of Zhang Yimou films like Hero, say, for example. Or House of Flying Daggers. It made me think of that as well. It's the cinematography is utterly arresting here, and it was something you pointed out, Sam, that it has a lot of heart to it as well. It's not just punch, 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 kick, kick, kick.
Well, yeah, it's kind of strange that the central like plot rotates around a very like emotional core. So Tony Leung, the fabulous, like the, you know, the world famous, well, he should be world famous. Tony Leung plays Sean's father, Shang-Chi's father. So the story is that like Tony Leung, his character is like the leader of the 10 rings, and he has these 10 rings and they've made him immortal, and he's been like over thousands of years, he's amassed all this like great sort of power and influence over the world. And basically his son, Shang-Chi, went against like basically what he wanted. He was like, he set up this whole sort of criminal like dynasty to pass over to his son, and his son basically said he didn't want it and moved away and went to go and live in San Francisco. And this film centers around that relationship of this father who wants his son to basically follow in his footsteps, and his son wanting to carve his own path. And that sort of central sort of emotional crux like is what the film like revolves around. There's not a man here, there's not a character here who wants to take over the world. They've already done it. They don't want to really access this great power to sort of reach into the universe, or he's already eternal. Like he's already got the 10 rings. So the whole drive of the movie centers on character and like the emotional pull between this family, and that was just staggering. Like I'm not, again, like that's the other reason why it just didn't feel like a Marvel film. It felt like this drama that was playing out, and both Tony Leung and Simu Liu, like their acting is incredible. Like I've not seen Simu in anything before. I've not watched like Kim's Convenience or anything like that, but he's really, really good. You could tell that he was definitely benefiting from acting across like real legends like Michelle Yeoh and Tony, like real like presence on screen.
You talk about kind of how the story is quite simple in terms of it's just character based. It's not the big bombastic stuff. So it sounds more quite serious as well, and kind of makes you think when you talk about these kind of standalone films. I always kind of think of stuff like, I think Black Panther is the standout one of a single. Obviously, it's part of the wider universe, but as a standout film that stands alone. With kind of when we talked about the Suicide Squad in a previous episode, and when we talked way back about Thor Ragnarok, I had an issue with Thor Ragnarok, you had an issue with the Suicide Squad, of that trope which tends to happen, and you kind of mentioned it about Marvel films, where you've got kind of these serious points and these dramatic points, and then constantly being undercut by a joke, and it kind of tiring. Is this something that kind of continues with this kind of film, or is the nature? I think for me, I think the nature of the jokes in the Marvel films, I think they suit that world that has been created, but at times it can be quite trying for me. So how does this film kind of walk that line?
So there is a moment in this, and this is why I urge listeners, if you've not watched Shang-Chi, don't Google it, because there is a moment in this that genuinely surprised me. And I think in a parallel universe, it could have broken the film. And I at instances when it would come back to it, I would turn to Sam and I was thinking, I can't believe that I'm seeing what I am seeing here.
I think it's going to be an incredibly divisive moment.
Yeah.
Of the film.
Yeah. And I did laugh. I did think I think they did pull it off because they didn't over-labour its usage, but it genuinely, I didn't quite know how to react to it, because it was one of the last things I was expecting to see in this first outing of this character. And like elsewhere, it's not like Thor Ragnarok in the sense that it's like it's a joke every 30 seconds or so. There's humour there. It's a Marvel film, there is levity there. Some of the jokes land, some of them don't, I would say, actually, in this. But I can forgive it for that, because a bit like Black Panther, just the heart that's underpinning that film in particular is what drives it through. And, you can roll your eyes quite a lot because Marvel does seem to have a lot of an obsession with daddy issues. Yeah. But actually what makes it interesting here is that actually as Sam said, you've got the dad. Yes, he's the big bad. Yes, we've seen that in Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 2. But the big bad has already got what he wants. But also you've got a sibling here, a sibling dynamic here as well, and that makes it really interesting. And it's quite a long film. This, I think it clocks in around 2.5 hours, but it's so you can get that emotional payoff with the characters that aren't just the father and son, which I think is really really important to recognise. Really, you'll have. There's no issues of unrequited love. It's not that there's a female. He has a female best friend, Katie, who grew up in America, and she knows nothing about this previous life of his. And they're pals. It's not the sense that anyone's holding a torch for anyone whatsoever. They just so happen to be a male and a female that are mates of each other, and it's a really lovely bond throughout the film. And likewise, the sister has her own life, her own friends. Her entire life is not just defined by the father and her brother. So it's a lot more interesting than perhaps we'd usually see in other Marvel films. Say, for example, I'm thinking like Ant-Man and the Wasp, where if you think about how much the Wasp appears in Ant-Man and the Wasp, and really what the Wasp has to do, it's really kind of very secondary, really.
Also that thing about the humour is that it works when there's stakes and there's tension, which was kind of not the case in the Suicide Squad. It was that, like, when Harley Quinn's on screen, she's there. She's only there, unfortunately, to do one job. However, here, because the action is so good that you're on the edge of your seat and literally, fingernails gripping onto the wonderful luxe recliners because of how good the action. It's like there's this fight on top of some bamboo scaffolding, which is a wonderful nod to Rush Hour, I think. Is it Rush Hour or Rush Hour?
Yeah, it's Rush Hour. Yeah,
Rush Hour, where they also have a fight on some bamboo, some bamboo scaffolding, and like I don't know whether it's just because I've not been to the cinema long, like recently, or just like there, and even though it's not real, like there's a moment with Awkwafina, who plays Katie, and like my heart was in my mouth. I was like, my God, like there are actual stakes here, there's actual tension. So when something cuts that, you're just like, it just gives you a little bit of a chance to breathe. And I think that all comes down from this like part of how this story is framed, and like the fact that the fights feel so physical, the fact that the story is driven by character and it's driven by emotion rather than some big bad with some big energy weapon or whatever, means that the humor actually feels like it's got a place. And Katie as a character, because she's a fully realized, character, she wisecracks to cut the tension. Like, and she doesn't wisecrack when things are really serious, which I think is another thing that marks it sort of differently. Like, she reacts to things like a normal human being would react to. She's not just there because the script writers thought, we need a joke here. Yeah. So it all plays into this like wonderful into this wonderful world. I mean, it's a bit of a shame. I think in the final act is very marvelly, and again, I think some people will enjoy it, some people won't. I think on a second watch, it might sort of land a bit better. I didn't enjoy it as much as I enjoyed the sort of the first couple of bits of the film, because kind of the kung fu sort of like takes a back seat. But I think, good on Marvel. Daniel Cretton's, who's the director, like his movies before this were ones called Just Mercy and The Glass Castle. And I'm like, I have never heard of those two films. And they've given him this, $100 million budget to go and make this film of of such significant importance. The fact that it's like the first Asian, lead in a superhero movie, and one that's focused on emotion and focused on character. One that has all these physical stunts, all these practical stunts, and he's pretty much knocked out the park. Like it's an incredible gamble that's really paid off.
Yep, best Marvel film so far of 2021.
I've got something here of yours, Kris.
Have you? Oh gosh, have you?
Yeah, and I have to say it's blocking up the hallway. I've been looking after it.
Is it his lunchbox?
It's bigger than his well, actually. Is it bigger than his lunchbox?
It's lunchbox sized.
It's about a Kris-sized lunchbox, yeah. I think.
What is it?
Pretty hefty.
What have you got?
It's Chris's PlayStation 5.
Oh,
can't believe you've not arranged some time to give it to him.
He has, yeah. I'm picking it up on Friday.
Dan, it's not up to me to give. I think I've done enough legwork.
You have gone above and beyond, Sam.
It's now up for Kris to do a bit of travelling to come and see, to come and get there.
Come and see it.
To be honest,
he has to stay there.
Go and see it. Visitation rights. He's got it for the weekend.
Sam needed one for the spare room.
Yeah. I mean, I was tempted because it feels like, no, I didn't want to be that guy who's like, I've got two now, baby. But yeah, it was quite the rush. Like back in March, I applied to be part of this like Curry's VIP thing. So Curry's in PC World, in order to stop scalpers.
I can just imagine you walking through the double doors of a Curry's. I think you'll find I'm a VIP.
Flashing his black card.
That he's made himself.
Oh! Is that Sam Turner? He's a PC World VIP.
To be honest, part of me, is. I think something about the PS5 experience does that to you, because obviously we've spoken about when I got my first one that I was given a code by Amazon that I had to give to the driver who dropped it off, and there I was on my doorstep pretending I was in a bloody like John le Carré novel, going like, "Have you got the code?" "Yeah, I've got the code." They're like, "Well, can I have the code?"
Got the box.
You got the box? Yeah, show me the box and I'll give you the code. However, here it was like you get given a code. So I've been in like the draw since March, and then I just got an email saying that I've been picked. And basically, you've got like I assume they have some sort of central stock, and then they send out enough codes that covers the stock, and they have 4 bundles that you can pick from, and you've got until a certain date to pick one of these bundles. And I offered it to both Kris and Pete. Pete declined, so Kris nabbed it.
Because, as we know, I'm a man of the people.
Yes, exactly.
And if the people can't have PS5s,
then Peter won't have PS5s. he just refuses everything he can just to get a little bit more storage space on this.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
And so you give you code, and like I was very keen. Like Chris said, "Oh, I'll pop down with it," but then I was like, "No, Chris, what if they've only got digital only bundles left? You need to get a disc."
Yeah.
So I went down for him, sort of walked in, and like as I was walking in, I was like, "How do I?" Like, there's no way of me walking in and explaining why I'm there that doesn't make me sound like a complete tool. And it's so like, I've got a VIP code for a PlayStation 5.
No, we've been expecting you.
That's the reaction I thought I got. But to be honest, mainly the response was, "Oh, all right." Just like,
Yay.
A few weeks ago,
Yeah.
you went to the UK Games Expo, and you came back with a ton of swag for me.
yeah.
Thank you. And Kosmos, Devir Kosmos, very kindly sent me a copy of Mazescape's Labyrinthos. And I have since been playing this in my lunch break because I'm back at work now. And what better way to ease myself into working from home than having a lunch break where I spend solving a maze?
So is this is Sam, is this the one that you showed me when we were at the stand, the one where you basically have to like you've got a starting spot and there's like it's almost like a book and fold out bits of paper and then you have to almost draw or like move your finger along the line to move through these mazes, and then the way that you fold the map.
Yeah, that's it. Yeah. This you get this lovely little it's like a little small box. It's like a book. I love these kinds of board game boxes, which
nice.
click a little magnet thing, and it clicks and opens out, and inside you've got 7 mazes or maps that are folded, kind of like what you get with like your road map sort of thing. And you open it up, and it's like the kind of mazes you'd play as a kid. You start at point A, you've got to get to point B, and you do not take in this case, it's like a little wooden pointer that comes with the game. It looks like a pencil, but it just hasn't got a lead in it. And you just have to get from A to B without taking this off the page.
Like one might find on a tray, on a piece of paper, at a Wimpy.
Yes.
That is a very deep cut.
Kind of.
And yeah, so it's that kind of like, it also took me back to those kind of puzzles you play as a kid, and you get, like your puzzle books sort of thing.
Yeah.
But what's quite good in this, that kind of takes it into the kind of the realm of something like a video game, or I should say actually the kind of mazes you get, where it isn't just getting to the center. Often the kids will be given like a little map and there's stuff they've got to find along the way. Yeah. It's a bit like that. So it's not just getting from A to B. It's also about, well, you've got to get to A to B, but you've got to pick up these objects along the way. You've got to find these keys to open this particular door. And what you're doing is you're kind of opening bits of the paper. It's a bit like, it looks, if you open everything out, it would look like that M.C. Escher painting, Relativity, that famous one from 1953, when you've got all the staircases going upside down and stuff. And so through this folding back and forth, you're kind of moving, you'll kind of go, okay, I can fold the paper here, I'll move my pointer onto here, then I'll unfold where I've just come from, which reveals this other network of paths. So you're constantly getting into this routine of opening and shutting the paper, as it were.
So are you, sorry, just check, are you opening and shutting on predetermined lines? So predetermined folds, as opposed to you're not just folding it in any which way?
No.
Okay,
No.
just checking.
I win. Folds it down.
That's the end.
And as you work your way through the levels, like it gets a little more complex. There's teleporters. So you can drag your pointer to a little jump teleportation pad, and then you can kind of instantaneously spring it to another part of the map there. And I know what you're thinking. Some of you listening to this, you may be thinking, "Gosh, that sounds quite tedious." When I played the first one, it was quite quick. It was quite simple, but it was kind of a tutorial. I then played the second one, and I tell you what, like, it's really good. And I'm not just saying this because I was given this for free. Genuinely, like, it kind of took me back to a little bit of my childhood, but also of kind of like the backtracking one would get in Tomb Raider. But you're not having to go loads and loads and far. It's just the kind of, okay, I just need to fold it. And you just baffled thinking, how can I not get there anymore? I was just there. How do I do this? And the answer's just here. I've just not got the right combination. And it's amazing how addictive this is. because what's really lovely is it's got like little checkpoints. Each map comes with checkpoints. You don't have to have covered everything to get to the end, but if you want to, you can go back and do that and be a completionist, which I really, really like. And it's quite deceptive. It's a bit unnerving when you look at the side of the box and it says runtime is between 5 and 90 minutes, and it's a solo game. But you can see it, definitely.
So do you have a completely different kind of physical map for each level, or are the maps kind of repeated depending on different levels and stuff?
It's a different map for each level, so 7 in the box.
Okay.
It strikes me a little bit like the appeal of games like Monument Valley.
Yeah.
Totally. Good shouts. Yeah, definitely.
You know, like trying to work in, because a maze is, you know, on a piece of paper is space in 2D, right? Like it's only ever 2 dimensions. But in this one, you're kind of doing that almost Fez, Monument Valley, you know, using different kinds of geometries in order to, and working in almost like different, not dimensions, but like more than 2D, if you know what I mean. It's not quite a 3D, but it's because you're using different sort of like,
it's isometric, essentially. Yeah, and it's a good point you make there, because like traditionally a labyrinth would be in 2 dimensions, which has one way in, one way out, and the maze is something 3-dimensional. You cannot see outside of what you're in. So this is an interesting combination of the two. And the labyrinth is something that's therapeutic. The maze is a puzzle. So put them together, and you've got this really lovely, and as a solo game, this lovely therapeutic, meditative puzzle. And you wouldn't be banging out all 7 levels in one go. You do not binge this game. But knowing it's there, and on a lunch break, I don't want to stare at a screen. I've been staring at a screen all morning. I can literally I can take a little map with me to work.
Yeah.
I don't need to take the points with me. And that's the thing. I can slip this effortlessly into my bag and just take it out, and I've got tons of time and tons of fun to play with there. Really, it's great, honestly. And it is about the size of like a Game Boy or a kind of like my Nintendo Switch Lite. And that as an alternative is really lovely every so often.
I was just say with you only having 7 maps, and obviously if you're starting off with kind of a tutorial, there's obviously going to be a difficulty kind of scale as it kind of levels up. How big a jump is that? Because obviously with 7 maps, there's not a lot of scope to incrementally get tougher and tougher and tougher. You have to kind of take some fairly big jumps to improve the difficulty. So as it goes on, do you find yourself taking kind of, oh, this one's suddenly really, really hard? The last one was much easier than this, or does it feel more kind of gradual than that?
It is gradual. I must admit that the step up from the first one to the second one was significant, but it was needed, definitely, because I think if it had been too incremental, I would have not been as interested in it as I am, genuinely. I think they do a very, very good job, and I genuinely think they could easily do more with this. And I think that there's a real sweet spot there, I think, for these kinds of solo games that, people work in different places. Some of them have got, the ability to, some people have lunch at their desks. Other people have an actual canteen to have their lunch. Something like this, it's very small. That is literally just one thing. It is the board, and you can just trace your finger along it. That's how I've been playing it. There's no other moving parts. It is literally just a map. That's it. It's great. It's brilliant. This pattern it's one of the oldest in the world. It really is. And it's really lovely to see it have a particularly new spin taken on it, because it's something that is a well-worn trope, particularly in video game design, let's say, for example. To see it here and for it to feel like an actual maze in an analog variant is great, really.
And I've been playing a game called Wordscapes, which is a very, very, very popular mobile game. I heard about it from a nice person on the internet that I've not met, but I would like to meet, called Bob Mortimer. And Bob Mortimer has been playing the game Wordscapes, and I thought, well, if it's good enough for Bob,
if it's good enough for him,
then I will give it a go and give it a quick play. And this is basically Scrabble plus a crossword, sort of.
Okay.
Right?
All right.
So this is all on your phone. So I'm playing this on my little Android phone. And so basically, so you're playing it in portrait. So imagine at the top half of the screen you have a series of small boxes where you would put letters, much like a crossword puzzle.
Okay.
Right? And then underneath, you have a circle which has a load of individual letters in there. And the idea is that you need to take those individual letters and create words from them. Very simple, very straightforward.
So are you getting clues like you would do in a crossword?
No, you're not. So this is entirely a test of vocabulary and, well, basically, yeah, just word knowledge, essentially. Knowing words and looking at collections of words and letting your mind wander for a moment to put different words together, different letters together in different ways to produce different words.
So it's Bananagrams, the video game?
I've not played Bananagrams, is that right? Seems reasonable.
Yeah, with the restriction of the fact that you have those circle of letters, obviously with Bananagrams.
But Bananagrams, you only have a certain amount of letters.
Yeah, but I see that there are differences, but you are right that there are a lot of similarities there.
The way I would describe it is it's like Scrabble if you never got different letters, but you had an infinite number of the letters you have. So if you had like let's say for example you got 8 letters on the Scrabble board, you could infinitely take out all of the S's and T's and F's and all of that sort of stuff to make different words, but those letters would never change.
So you use the same collection of letters to fill out all of them.
And so the idea is you might end up with 6 letters. So you end up with, let's say, for example, 6 letters, and you need to create as many words as you possibly can from that. You fill those in on this little board at the top of the screen, and you need to just fill in those little boxes. If you find a word that is not at the top of the screen, but is a real word, the game then banks those for you, and you get these extra coins. So this is one of these free-to-play games, which, if you want a little hint, you pay like 100 phony baloney coins, and it will go, here you go, here's a hint. Now, the difference between, because obviously I know free-to-play is a bit of a hot topic for some people, it's totally fair. Like, if you were actually better at vocabulary, you'd be fine. Like, you don't have to ever use any of the free-to-play stuff. It really is just a case of, what is that word? And the word is never a name. It's never a it's never like slang particularly. It's proper words.
So there's definitive answer then.
Yeah. So there's always definitive answers. So the idea is essentially that you're uncovering what words there actually were that you needed to find.
Sorry. So if you find a word, say you make a word and the word is like crime or whatever.
Yeah, crime.
If that word is in the crossword, it will automatically ping up there. And if it's not, it goes, here's 10 coins.
Absolutely. Yeah, exactly.
All right, okay, I get it.
Okay, so, and then you would take that word crime, and then you would go, what letters, what can I use these letters to create? And it has to be a 3-letter word. Can I do anything else with that? And the answer is yes, you can. Ire, I-R-E.
Or Mike.
Yes, or Mike. There you go. So,
or Rim.
You'd be very good at this. So, the reason I bring that up is it does feel a lot like. First of all, I've been really enjoying it. It's been a game that I've been enjoying playing mobile phone games a lot recently, just simply because I haven't had time to kind of sit down and play video games. Big, proper, chunky video games. And it's one of those nice things to kind of relax to. It's just very straightforward. It's a really easy to grasp concept. There's little mechanics here and there to kind of keep you coming back every day. Like, here's the puzzle of the day. And, hey, do you want to unlock a crown? Well, you can if you get enough phony baloney crown points by completing these levels. And I've unlocked a picture of a squirrel, which is what...
Brilliant.
Right? So this is all very, very light. But the thing that I kind of came away from it with was it really does tax you after a while. You are getting to the point where there are 8 letters and you have like 12 words to find, and you'll get stumped within the first 2 words you find, and then you're like, what the hell is this meant to be? And you're sort of sitting there. And I've noticed over the last 2, 3, 4 weeks that I've been playing this that actually my vocabulary skills have improved. They've actually, the ability to find these different words has become a lot quicker. I'm actually getting through levels a lot faster. It reminds me of those like brain training games from back in the day. That playing these word games constantly actually gets you more into the groove of doing these things.
When I had a dartboard in the house, I'll be just pick up the dartboard on a lunch break or whatever, or of an evening, and over time I vastly saw my maths improving. considerably.
Yeah.
Because when you just like, when you first start and you spend ages at the chalk going, right, 20 plus 19, but now I've got to take that away from 301.
Right.
Like eventually you like start learning all like, the shortcuts, triple 19 is 57, and take that away, and your maths just generally just become, because you're exercising that part of your brain, which you probably use like maybe once or twice a day or something.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Like we're always like, our phones are also our calculators, right?
Yeah, sure.
So I'm always thinking to myself, I'll just do that sum. It's a really easy sum. I don't really mind. I'll just do that quickly on here.
I don't mind. I'll do this one, phone. Don't
worry, phone. I'll handle it. But like, it's
treat yourself.
It's the same with words, right? So we're so used to having things like Grammarly, and even just like word processing things, saying like, what about this word instead? Like Google Docs now predicts what you might want to try and write.
Oh, I hate that.
I hate that too. It's like, you don't know me, Google Docs. You do, but I wish you didn't. And I'm actually really enjoying just thinking about my vocabulary and remembering really like fun words, and like actually kind of impressing myself that like, oh yeah, I do know a few words, don't I? Which is, good, because obviously I used to be a writer. But yeah, so I've just really enjoyed it.
I've actually been playing it as well. I don't think I've got as far as you, because I think I'm still on like I'm on like level 40, and I'm still only on 5 letters.
Okay, yeah.
I don't think I've enjoyed it as much as you have. One of the reasons for that is at times it does make me feel stupid, because there's like a 4-letter word, and I'm smart enough to know most of the 4-letter words, or a 3-letter word.
Yeah.
But my brain just can't see it. And I think because the way the letters are presented, they're presented in a circle. I think that fact is quite important. The fact they are presented in a circle, I think, changes the way that you can see the letters, kind of picture them in a word. Like when I played a game and the word has been, I don't know, iced or something like that.
Right.
And I've got all the letters there, but I just can't, my brain can't make that connection. And so I've tried to do just random not so much random selections, but tried to play around, and suddenly I've put in ice. I'm like, oh yeah, of course, I know that word. That's not a difficult word. It's not like it's not like it's some kind of like chemical term for something.
Right.
It's the word iced.
Yeah.
I know that. That's not a problem.
But it's all really straightforward. But it's that thing that kind of taxes your brain. Not so much. It's not like a cryptic crossword, right? Where you're just like, oh, what is this? But like it's just enough of a challenge to the point whereby you do have to think about it. You do have to concentrate to a certain degree, but you don't have to concentrate so much that it takes up your full attention.
Yeah, and it's like with the darts thing. Like you learn shortcuts. Like, so if it starts with a consonant, the next letter must be a vowel. And if it starts with a vowel, the next letter is probably a consonant. And so, or if it has like an ED, then there's like a high chance that that's going to be an ed word or an ES word or an ER word. Like you're looking for those. Like it's the same way that they crack the Enigma code.
Yeah,
exactly. Yeah,
it's they look for patterns within language, and that's how they that's how they crack it. That's how that's the secret to doing anagrams. Is going, right, I've got this. I know the next letter has to be a vowel or a consonant.
So I am 140 levels in, and I think the best thing I can possibly say is pay to remove the ads. That's the only thing I find as the criticism for this. That
is something I was going to say, because as one of the reasons I think I don't like it as much as you is there are a lot of ads.
It's egregious.
Yeah, it's like every say 3 rounds, sometimes less than that.
Yeah,
there's an ad comes up that you have to kind of sit through or wait for it to play through a certain amount before you can kind of press the little X in the tiny little X in the corner. If you don't hit it bang on, it opens up the ad, and so it's all that stuff. Really kind of
So you can absolutely pay to remove those forever, and that to me is probably the best. I think it's like £5. That's probably like it's it's pricey, but also it's a game with literally, I would imagine, thousands, if not tens of thousands of levels, and it's all kind of the same, but it's also all kind of fine and kind of good. And like if it's definitely not something that I'm again, it's not like Mazescape. I'm not going to sit down and burn through it for 9 hours. Like it's not made for that. But what it does feel is a very nice 12 minutes in the morning while you're having a cup of tea.
I'm glad you said tea. You know what Dan's like with his iPad?
Okay, we have a listener question. It's very exciting.
Oh, right,
We always love to get these. This one came through to us on Twitter from a fine gentleman called Mark. His Twitter handle being Lithium Project. So hello to you, Lithium Project /Mark. He says, hello. Any recommendations for 2-player board/card games? Let me open the floor. And let me close the floor, because I've got one to begin with, because I don't want anyone else to say it, because I don't have many options.
Yeah,
so I'm going to jump in, and I'm going to say Odin's Ravens is a game that I really enjoy. That's a 2-player game. It's kind of, it's a board card game. Very, very small, from Osprey Games. Really kind of quick and easy to play. Not too taxing, doesn't take up too much space. Really nicely presented. Yeah, so I'm just putting that out there, because you guys are going to have more options than I have. But yeah, Odin's Ravens is a top one. And it's also great for kind of people who are not perhaps used to board games. So I played it with my wife, and my wife doesn't play board games, but she really liked it. And we've played that before. So yeah, so that's a really good one for people who play games as well, because obviously we've all a lot of us have enjoyed it. But also if you're playing with someone who's not as au fait, it's a really kind of simple game to kind of pull in as well.
I almost think that there almost needs to be 2 categories. There's the lighter fare, which I think, slightly irritatingly, the internet refers to as couples games often or not. They usually mean that when they think that, which I think is a real misnomer. But the kind of lighter fare, which I enjoy, and the slightly heavier, crunchy, 2-player games, because there's a marked difference between Odin's Ravens and Twilight Struggle. Like, both are 2-player games, but given the fact that we don't know like what kind of a 2-player game Mark means in this regard, other than that it's something like card or board game, I think we need to kind of give some nice recommendations from across that spectrum, really, in terms of complexity and weight.
Well,
I could do that.
I've got a few recommendations.
Roll your sleeves up then, people.
Kosmos is a great place to start. They do an incredible range of 2-player games that we've all experienced and liked. I think, Dan, you've got a copy of Aquilin. I've got Lost Cities and Targi in my collection, Kahuna as well, and they're all like exceptionally solid, cheap, like 2-player games. Like Lost Cities is probably the most classic. Basically, it's been out and available and in print for decades now, I think, and it's very simple and easy to get your head around. And if you're not an idiot like me, the scoring's quite simple, actually. And Targi is probably the other end of that spectrum, where it manages to be quite a complex little, almost Euro-style game that takes about sort of upwards of an hour to play in this very small box, and it's only between 2 players. Those are good sort of like Kosmos games to start off with. That's also a good market. I mean, let's talk about the hot new person on the scene, and obviously that's Flesh and Blood. That's a damn good 2-player game, and what's good about that is because it's collectible, you can really dive in with another person and kind of that was always the enjoyable thing. The thing I enjoyed about playing Magic so much is that the game is one thing, but then there's talking about it with the other people that you're playing with outside of the game, which makes it such a the actual hobby. Yeah, you're right, Pete. The actual like collecting, which I think adds so much to that dueling experience, where you get your Flesh and Blood deck or you get your Magic deck, and you spend like the week honing it and working out like how to play, trying to work out how the synergy of it plays together, and then entering that duel with the other player, with the other person. It makes that 2-player experience so much more, like it just makes it really tasty, like gives it a lot more bite. I think there's definitely value and worth that in those games as 2-player experiences.
I think that's a good shout. So Gungadin, should we stick with that then? Do you want to give a lighter 2-player than a heavier 2-player?
I think for me, the lighter 2-player one would probably... Should we just stick with 2-player only games, or
Yeah.
I mean, I think there is. I mean, I know, like I've played like Splendor 2-player, and that's more than 2-player game, but that works really well as a 2-player game. So there are some that you can play wider that actually work really well, like that's a game that I think I've preferred playing just one-on-one.
Absolutely.
Let's not. There's someone out there who's desperate to ask us for the best 2-player games.
Just
that
two-player.
that are not 2-player games.
Cool.
So let's not rob them of that
moment.
joy and satisfaction.
So for me, it would be the one that gets the most play is Seven Wonders Duel. It is a very, very good, I guess, climb up a tech tree. If you can, try and play it with the at least one of the expansions.
I think the Pantheon expansion for me makes it I think it's an essential expansion.
Yeah,
for it,
I do too. I think it's a little bit too light without it, and not light in a pleasant way, but light in a not so many options to sort of defeat your opponent kind of a way. That's the kind of lighter one. I think it's very, very good. It'll also teach you some of the mechanics and some of the ideas behind the game Seven Wonders, which is an absolute classic. But yeah, I think that is a really good way of playing a game with a lot of strategy and forward thinking, which I think is really good. The complex one, I don't know if anybody's heard of this game, but
here we go.
It's called Warhammer 40,000 Kill Team.
Oh God!
And also, I mean, theoretically, you could play it with more players, but honestly, I think that there is something beautiful about playing a skirmish level game like Kill Team. You can get into them relatively cheaply. The original Kill Team has just been superseded by a new edition, so you can get the original edition pretty cheap these days, and I strongly recommend it.
Can I suggest something that probably would be a better experience than Warhammer Kill Team?
Well, you can try
anything.
Go on.
Because I'd suggest the Undaunted series by Osprey, so Undaunted Normandy and Undaunted North Africa, as like skirmish games. They're exceptional, and Kris and I have played quite a lot of them.
Really
and
good.
we're currently working way through a campaign on Undaunted Normandy, and yeah, it's a wonderful little deck building, rolling and attacking game that perfectly encapsulates those little smaller war-based skirmishes, but does it all on a much smaller and intense duel between two players. They're really, and obviously a cheaper entry point. You don't have to paint the miniatures.
No, absolutely. And
you don't have to learn loads of rules.
Yeah,
and
no,
get
you're
a rule
absolutely
around
right. But
all
we're
that
talking
kind of
about
stuff.
big, complicated games for grown-ups now. So what we're talking about here is something like a kind of miniatures level skirmish-based game. Necromunda, Kill Team. There's also other things out there as well that are definitely worth looking into that have very small player counts. Things like Frostgrave from Osprey. Things like Blood Bowl and Guild Ball and those kinds of games. They are very, very intense, as Sam is making out, and they are definitely not for everybody. But if there's...
And a lot of investment.
They are a lot of investment. They are a lot of investment. They are a smaller in financial investment than these big miniatures games, but they are no less of a sort of time investment. You need to paint them, you need to learn very complicated rules, all of this kind of stuff. But if it feels like you're going to do something that's a little bit more continual, you want to play something with a bit more of a sort of continuity to it, a little bit like Sam was saying with the Undaunted Normandy's campaign mode. A campaign in a skirmish game is a lot of fun if it seems like something that would be of interest.
Can I throw one more into the hat? Because last Christmas, my Secret Santa, I asked for a 2-player board game.
You did.
And the board game that was bestowed upon me ever so kindly by Santa, or Father Christmas, was Fungi, which is a terrific little game, which is just for 2 players. I think, Pete, you bought it, didn't you? Sorry.
I do own a copy of it, yes.
I broke the magic.
I own a copy of it.
Yeah.
Well, yeah, so that's another one in there to be thrown into the mix.
Fungi's a good one. Yeah, really good one.
Fungi's great.
I think if
really good.
if you're out in the States, I think it's called Morels?
Yes.
Morels? Something like that.
Yeah.
But yeah, very, very good.
Speaking of that Christmas theme, the Christmas present Sam got for Christmas is actually genuinely my favourite 2-player games, which is Compromat.
Oh, Helvetic.
Helvetic. Let's just
dance in that pool for a bit.
Oh my word! So that beautiful graphic style, but basically blackjack with a kind of an interesting spy theme where you can kind of purchase, you're trying to fight for purchasing little gadgets that give you bonus points. There's some little modifiers there which make it a little bit cheekier, as it were. I love that game. I really, really do. It's very simple. It's very elegant, as a lot of two-player games are. It's towards the heavier side, and this is not as much of an investment as the example Pete gave, but War of the Ring or Battle of the Five Armies, which is ostensibly a two-player game. But obviously you have to be A, very heavily invested in the kind of Tolkien mythos, and B, heavily invested in terms of being able to allocate enough time and effort into working out how that plays. That's definitely to the heavier side of the two-player genre.
I'm still surprised that none of us have mentioned Star Realms.
Because I agree, but I've kind of changed my mind a little bit on Star Realms. I think Star Realms...
Is that because you spent about 60 quid or whatever on that massive, huge pack, which kind of defeated the wonderful thing about Star Realms?
Somewhat. So, yes. But also, I actually think it works better as a digital app. I definitely strongly recommend playing it.
Yeah.
And it is, it is a good adaptation of the card game, but I would definitely recommend getting the digital version over the physical version. I think it just plays a lot nicer, and is quicker and... yeah, better, easier to set up. Like, the card version is like, oh, okay, this takes... like, you could have played 3 games by the time that you've set up and played 1 game of the physical version of Star Realms.
But genuinely, I do think if I had one two-player recommendation, it would have been Star Realms. Like, as soon as I bought it, I sleeved my cards. It's the only game I own where I've sleeved the cards, and it just makes that constant act of shuffling so much more bearable. But genuinely, everyone I've introduced it to have loved it. Like, my neighbour... like, genuinely, I could say to my neighbour, says, like, what's the best thing you've got out of knowing me? He would probably say Star Realms. Genuinely. But, like, that idea that of just everyone starts with the same deck and it's buying cards in the centre marketplace, and then it's about that trying to shed cards that you don't need to ensure the chances of you getting the cards you want coming to that hand. It's great. I've played so many games of Star Realms. I've had to delete it from my phone so many times because it is something quite addictive about it. So that is an excellent shout. I mean, I think we should probably just reel off a list, because otherwise we'll be here all day, really. And Mark can probably go away and make his own shopping list and kind of do the digging himself a little bit.
Yeah, all right then. Memoir 44.
Brilliant game. Nearly bought it. Santorini.
Patchwork is probably one of the classic two-player games, up there with Lost Cities as like a must-have, a must-play, I'd say.
Jaipur.
Oh, I love Jaipur. I love it just for the fact that you own it, and I just like borrowing it from you for a couple of like weeks here and there, and like, yeah, lovely. If you like abstract games, and by that I mean like chess. Chess is an abstract game. Hive and The Duke.
The Duke is a masterpiece.
Are really good two-player games. And then possibly my favourite 3 two-player games of recent times that I've played. Mandala, I think, is an absolutely superb little two-player game that comes with a cloth board. It's beautiful to look at. It's really... the challenge between you and the person across from you is really feisty and interesting. And like, sometimes when you play two-player games, like, they can either be too competitive or there's not enough competition between you and the person across from you, and Mandala just like strikes the absolute like right balance between what I think a two-player game, or definitely like a two-player game if you're just like chilling out and like trying to kill like 20-30 minutes. Like, it doesn't feel too competitive, but there's just enough of an edge there. Polis, I think, is like, wow, that's like a massive war game for 2 people, like a whole like battle over years between the Greeks and the Athenians that me and Kris played recently, and like I'm really itching to play again. And then my final one of the 3 was, I think King Domino Duel is really interesting, and that's a roll and write game strictly for 2 people, and that's quite interesting. But I think there are roll and write games that just fit 2 people anyway, quite naturally. But Curious Cargo is one of those two-player games that I am just always itching to play. Infuriatingly, it is incredibly difficult and it is challenging, but I think it is so massively rewarding. And it's a game where you both run competing factories. And the first part of the game is just drawing these tiles out from a bag and basically doing this little tile and pipe laying puzzle where essentially you're trying to get different coloured tokens out of your factory onto this conveyor belt. And the second half of the puzzle is trying to make it so that trucks line up perfectly with your like outbound traffic of stuff that your factories are making in order so they can go off and get delivered. But quite interestingly is the other half of the puzzle, and I realise I've described a game that has three halves, but that's kind of what Curious Cargo is like, is essentially your factory can also be set up to rob the goods that are being sent from your opponent's factory and basically get sucked up into your factory if you can create the pipes and the sort of like chains and the delivery structure on the other side of your board. It's an incredibly complicated and exceptionally well like detailed as a two-player game, but everyone that I've played it with have you know, they've always said this is really, really challenging, but I really, really, really want to play it again. And it's a very good game.
Hanami Koji.
Yes.
I cut, you choose. I love that little mechanic. I don't own enough games that have that as a nice two-player game.
Mm-hmm.
Really good.
Matcha
is a brilliant game and nice little pieces in that as well. Actually, Hatsuden, which you got me from the UK Board Games Expo.
Oh yeah, of course, yeah.
Which is about renewable energy and very elegant use of cards and a very clean, clear graphic display as well, which I really love.
Right, the one thing I'm worried about is we're doing it again. We're kind of just rattling off stuff. So let's all pick one.
Yeah.
And then that's like, so we've got a big, huge list that Mark can go away and have a look at. But if we were all just to pick one, what would we pick? What would be the two-player game?
I think personally for me, you know, go and get yourself a copy of Seven Wonders Duel. It is really good. Like honestly, like you'll have a lot of fun with it. You'll think about it a lot, and every time you come back to it, there'll be new strategies that you can implement. And it's really good to play with somebody that you've played with multiple times, because you kind of get to know what they're like to play with.
Okay, good shout, Dan.
Odin's Ravens. That's
Odin's Ravens.
Odin's Ravens. Right off the top. Sticking with it.
I'm going to go with Star Realms, just because it is the most played two-player game I own. And it has gone down an absolute treat with everyone I've introduced it to. They've ended up buying their own copy of it. And don't be put off by the theme if you're not usually into kind of like science fiction. There is a fantasy version of it called Hero Realms, say for example. And it just once you've understood its iconography and you've got its rhythm, that process of shuffling, shedding, buying cards and developing your strat that way, it's great. Honestly, it's addictive, and you just want to keep playing it.
Yeah. It also opens you up to lots of different mechanics that are used in lots of different board games. So that idea of like, you know, deck building and synergies, all that kind of stuff, like Star Wars is great. I mean, I'm kind of tempted to have a caveat, but I feel like I shouldn't. I think it's got to be, I really want to say Curious Cargo, but so I'll say Lost Cities. I just think it's a classic for a reason, and it's been in print for as long as it has been for a reason. I think it is just like one of the two-player games. It's very, very good.
It's a very special game. That I think we've got four very, very good recommendations for Mark there.
Definitely.
Okay, that was another episode of Staying In with Sam Turner, Peter Wington, Dan Frost, and myself, Kris Darby. It's the morning after the recording. I'm awake. I'm primed. I just wanted to kind of do quickly a little shout out. I forgot to mention the designers and the artists of Mazescape Labyrinthos. We have Pablo Cespedes and Victor Hugo Cisternas, and the art by Ivan Gahona. And thank you to Devo and Kosmos for giving me a copy of that game. I have really, really enjoyed it, and it's made my lunch breaks incredibly enjoyable and a lot more bearable than they usually would be. And it has given me that really, really sought after time away from a screen as I have returned to work. So thank you again for that. That was great. So usual stuff. We had a listener question today, which was great. And if you want to send us a question, feel free to do so. Stayinginpod@gmail.com is our email address. However, as Mark did, you can reach out to us through social media. @stayinginpod is our handle, whether it be Twitter, Facebook, Instagram as well. Just drop us a line, say hello, ask us a question, or ask us for recommendations like Mark did, or recommend stuff to us. Maybe you are Bob Mortimer and you actually think that Pete needs to be playing or watching other things as well. And what we're going to do is that we're going to try and see if we can give each listener question one of our stickers. For any of you who are at the UK Board Games Expo, you would have probably been inundated with our stickers if you bumped into us or met us at all when we were doing the rounds. So we've got, I think, a couple of those left. I checked with Sam the other day. I think we've got a couple left. So if you send us in a question, we'll send you a sticker. And then you have to work out what to do with said sticker. So that's quite cool, isn't it? Obviously, there is the curated playlist on Spotify, which I do go on about quite a bit. There's our Steam curation page for any PC games we've discussed. There is our Board Game Geek page, so any board games that we discuss there. So Mazescape Labyrinthos will be appearing on our Board Game Geek page as well, with our little review of it on there as well. So if you want to kind of find other games that we spoke about, I know we reeled off quite a long list of board games today, but there's still loads more that we've discussed on previous episodes that can also be found on Board Game Geek. Likewise, the same for our kind of video game content and for our Steam curation page. Awesome. Okay. Happy middle of September, and we will see you at the beginning of October. Bye.